Hey YouTube, Liam here. I've been wanting to get around to making a YouTube video for quite a while now. Now this is my first ever attempt at it, so bear with me. I thought the subject I'd start off with first of all is something I know a fair bit about, which is old-fashioned video game consoles. I thought I'd start with my favourite one, which was a console released in the early 90s called the Atari Jaguar, which was supposed to be the world's first ever 64-bit console, because at the time it was competing with things like the Super Nintendo, the Sega Mega Drive, or the Sega Genesis for those watching from America. Now, it didn't really pan out as a 64-bit console. It was nothing more really than a 32-bit, and it didn't work out too well for Atari either, because they weren't really able to compete with the PlayStation or the Nintendo 64, which weren't released far along after it. It's a really good console, the Atari Jaguar, it really is, and it's just a shame that it didn't work out because it was Atari's last-ditch attempt at a video game console, and they just didn't make any more consoles after that. So I'll show you what this good old console looks like, see what you think. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is the Atari Jaguar. For some of you, you might find this to be a familiar console. It has got a good fan base, but as I say, it's just a shame that it didn't work out as a popular console, because it really was quite good. It shouldn't have been advertised as a 64-bit machine when it just wasn't. Right, now this is the look of the console. So the two controllers will go in there. Power button on here. The good thing about the power button with the Atari Jaguar, it would not come on if there wasn't a game inserted. Now, for a cartridge-based console, the really unusual thing about this one is that, as you can see here, there is no dust cover. Now, the dust cover on this has not been removed or torn off or broken off or anything like that. It just didn't have one, and really not quite sure why. Because if dust gets inside here, it can stop the games connecting and it stops the game working properly, which is a shame. Now, we go to the back of the Jaguar, we can see the inputs. Now you're probably thinking, what are those? Now the unusual thing about the Jaguar is that it could be connected in two ways, rather than simply like SCART lead or AV cable, or even just RF. This one was connected in either RF cable, which was the standard thing for consoles in those days, but instead of a normal AV cable or SCART connection, you had the option of its version of a SCART lead, which I will show you now. It's in my box here. This is what it was connected with. I'll show you that. Here we are. Which is really unusual connection. These are actually quite rare to come across now. If you try and buy a Jaguar these days on eBay or wherever you may try and get a retro console from, you'll find that it just comes with a standard RF output. But this is the connection that I use, because it is basically a SCART connection. So if we go to the other end of it, here we are. It is a SCART connection, so it's slightly better than your standard RF connection. Plus, you don't have to tune these in. Now, moving on to the controller. This is the most unusual thing about the Jaguar that most people notice. That this is the controller. And if you look at it in the hand, you've got your normal three main buttons here. You've got your options button, your pause button, and your standard controller that you get on most video game controllers. This keypad here was the really, really unusual thing about a normal controller for a video game console. The reason that number pad is there is for these. Now basically these are overlays that came with every single game, or almost every single game that you bought with Atari Jaguars. What you would basically do is you would insert this onto here like this. So obviously this part does slip in there as well, but I've only got one hand free at the moment. Now if you slide these in, this is the one for Alien vs Predator, the game. It basically then shows you on this overlay exactly what each button in there will do. As you have a look. That's the one if you're playing as the Predator in that game, and then there's one for the Alien and one for the Marine, which is that one. Now you did need these with a lot of shoot 'em up games and things like that, because there were just too many options that had to be controlled through here. And without the overlay, you really didn't know what they were. Now the overlays are reasonably hard to come by, but in these days of Google and other websites and search engines, if you ever need the overlay for a particular Atari Jaguar game, all you've got to do really is just type in the game's name and overlay, and there'll be one on the screen that you could make your own overlay with or print out. So obviously it's best to have the originals like these, but if you can't come across the originals, then you can at least make your own. Now these aren't all, these are just some of the Atari Jaguar games that I've got, including Doom, which is boxed. These are the Jaguar games. Strange bit of bendy shape on them. Have a look there. Now, no end labels on the top, which is a bit annoying, so if you've got them all on a shelf like that, you can't really see what they're called until you literally pull them out. And the game would go in like this. There we go. That would be your game in, and if you've got it plugged in, that'll turn it on. These are some of the other games. This one obviously, Alien vs Predator, one of the best games on the Atari Jaguar. This is also one of the best games that you can find on the system. It's called Tempest 2000. If those of you who played the original Tempest on the Atari will know that this is a really good game. It's something that would play on virtually any system if it came on it, because the graphics are virtually non-existent. They are just not even up to Pac-Man standards when it comes to graphics. They're really, really simplistic. But the gameplay on this one is really, really well done. There's Wolfenstein 3D, which is another version of Doom, but it involves shooting Nazis and undead Nazis and things instead of just monsters like you do on Doom. Cybermorph is an extremely bad version of Star Fox or Star Wing, depending on which country you come from. It was just really awful. They haven't really decided on how to make like things in front of them appear when you're flying a plane, and just walls and trees and everything would just appear out of nowhere. It was a really rubbish game. Then we've got Flashback, which was a sequel to Another World. I don't know what that game is called outside of the UK. I think it's called Another World in other countries as well. But Flashback is basically a platform game where you go along solving puzzles, shooting people. Kazumi Ninja is the easiest one to describe of the lot, because it's basically a really bad version of Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat, of course, brilliant game for its day. Kazumi Ninja, it was gory. You know, you could put a lot of blood on there and things like that, but the actual gameplay itself was rubbish. It was slow, and the game was just rubbish. It had this really strange character selection screen as well. Rather than just literally picking your character, you had to wander around this 3D area and select the statue of the character you wanted. Bit rubbish, but still, the games are worth having. This one here, which has got its overlay inside the packet, is called Iron Soldier, which I've got the manual for as well. In that game, it's really, really good. The graphics are basic and quite blocky, but you basically take control of a giant metal soldier and you have to go around shooting down other metal soldiers and planes and things like that. Really good game, but unusual. So that's the Atari Jaguar. Now, the Atari Jaguar came in a really nice looking box, which I'll show you as well. Okay, this is the box that the Jaguar comes in. I really like this box, I've got to admit. It's one of the best box designs I've ever seen for a computer game console. Atari up there with the American flag, United States. I think Atari is one of the last American-made video game consoles, because things like obviously Nintendo, Sony, I think the Japanese, Microsoft obviously with the Xbox is also an American video game console, but Atari were there first. They were one of the best, and the Atari the Atari 2600, which I've also got, which I'll show in another video, is one of their first video game consoles, and to this day is brilliant. Right, I'll show you the back of the box on the Jaguar. Now, let's have a look. Now, the Jaguar is just showing on the box here, you know, some of the games that you can get for it. One thing I neglected to mention earlier, which is the reason for this unusual oval shape on the Jaguar itself, is because near the end of the lifespan of this computer game console, it had a CD add-on, which basically fit right on top of it and covered obviously where you put the carts in, because it had its own cart slot as well, so it could take both CD games and normal cartridge games. Now, the Atari Jaguar itself, though, sold in very small number, and the CD add-on as well sold an even smaller number. I may do a video on the CD add-on at a later time, because yes, I do have one, and yes, they are very rare and very expensive. The CD add-on alone cost me just over £400, which is something along the lines of $800, something like that. I probably overpaid for it, but they're very rare to come across. And that's it. One other thing which didn't ever get released with the Atari Jaguar, which I neglected to mention, is the ports on the back of it, where you can obviously put in your normal RF connection, or you can put in the SCART connection with the unusual connection that we went on before. Is that it also has, or did have, a port to be able to basically put a wire in that allows you to connect your Jaguar to another Jaguar and another Jaguar, so that you could basically do a very old version of online gaming, really playing with other consoles all connected together in sort of loop. They never actually bothered to release that cable, though, I don't believe, because they decided to retire the Jaguar before they could get round to it. It was only available for about a year or so over in the UK, maybe a little bit longer. In comparison to some games consoles, like if you consider the Sony PlayStation, which has got around 1,000 or more games, even the old NES Nintendo from the 80s had about 800 of them, whereas the Atari Jaguar had less than 90 games, probably about mid-80s, I believe. About 15 of them were the CD add-on games. So that's it. Out of that entire CD add-on, only 15 games were actually made for it. There is a good homebrew market for Atari Jaguar CD games, though, which is still being made today, so you can still get some Atari Jaguar CD games. And of course, the cartridge games pretty much go on eBay from anything from a few pounds to a lot more, depending on the rarity of the game. I will maybe feature some more Atari Jaguar games in the future, because that is just a small amount that I've got. This was just a quick video to show you the basics of the Atari Jaguar and mark my first ever YouTube video. So there we go. Well, there you go. That's the Atari Jaguar. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please rate the video, support the video, leave a comment for me. By all means, leave comments, questions. I'll certainly try and answer them if I can. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe as well. I'm really hoping to do quite a few videos like this in the future. Hope you enjoyed it. Okay, bye-bye.